Chasing Gains Radio, the insatiable quest for constant progression. Chasing is the act of pursuing. Gains is the result or positive outcome. Chasing Gains Radio. Here's your host, Cody McAuliffe. Hey guys, welcome to Chasing Gains Radio. Today we're going to be going through where Chasing Gains is going in the future and talking a little bit about my progression in terms of my dieting history, the recommendations I used to make versus the recommendations that I'm making now. So first of all, talking about where Chasing Gains Radio is going in the future. To start off with, it was primarily focused on working with performance athletes. Now we're transitioning into working with performance athletes, people who are looking at improving their performance, upskilling in terms of nutrition. All of these factors are still going to be included. However, we're also working with specifically personal trainers on ways to be able to improve their businesses and getting guests on around those topics as well. So the reason why this is because I'm working with more and more personal trainers. A lot of people aren't getting the results that they're looking for in terms of their business, so I'm helping a fair few people out now just because people have basically just been asking me for it, so I'm just providing that for the people who are looking for extra help in terms of their business, in terms of business development, getting them more sustainable lead sources so they've constantly got leads coming in and things of that nature. So I'm doing that in terms of helping educate other personal trainers as well as helping educate other personal trainers and general population people who are looking at improving their performance, which is where that podcast is going in the future. So it's going to remain with that brand, Chasing Gains Radio, with the focusing on that result or outcome that people are looking to achieve, whether that's in business or in performance. Doesn't necessarily matter. We're going to be covering both topics. So it's going to be some great times ahead. Chasing Gains Radio has been around for almost a year now, so if you don't know who I am, my name's Cody. I'm the host of Chasing Gains Radio and creator of and founder of Chasing Gains and all the different aspects of that business. So as I said, I've got like two different branches of part of that. That's the performance part of it and the business part of it as well. So if you're looking at, finding out more about those, I've got separate Facebook pages that you can probably find in the links to this video to basically find out more about that and get some help with that. So still going to have that same focus of working towards the result or outcome that people are looking at achieving. It just means that I'll be doing it based on business and performance. So we're going to go into a bit of a story about me, actually. So it's been, Chasing Gains Radio has been around for a year now, so we're going to be talking a little bit about, my history in terms of nutrition. So nutrition is something that's developed quite a lot for me over time. So just going back to like before I was a personal trainer, basically didn't know anything about nutrition. Even when I was a personal trainer for the first basically year, I didn't know anything about nutrition comparative to what I know now. So what I did was I was struggling to get results with my own training. So what I did was I actually purchased an online program to be able to help me with my nutrition, to be able to get the results that I was looking for, to be able to get some muscle growth, which I was actually looking for. So the program that I bought basically taught me one thing, and that was that I needed to eat more to be able to do that. So looking back, the analogy, was if I was looking at building a structure, which was my body, or the analogy is a house, I needed to have the materials to be able to build that so I could make it bigger and get more muscle. So I had to eat more. I was basically just under eating, which is what I find a lot of people are actually doing. This is both males and females, anyone actually looking at getting results. They think that eating less is going to help them get more results. That's not necessarily the case. What it's going to do is it's going to decrease performance, and it's going to mean that the materials aren't there for like muscle growth and repair. So that isn't always the answer, decreasing your food intake to be able to get the results that you're looking for, even if you're looking at body fat loss. There are different things that we can manipulate to be able to get results based on that. So when I was, after that was my first light bulb moment that I had. I just had to increase my food intake to be able to get muscle growth, the results that I was actually looking for. So that was kind of step one. I kind of transformed my body over a kind of 12-week period. I can probably post the photos up here. But I was able to get like a lot more muscle growth in that time frame because I wasn't training effectively previously, and I got the nutrition on point to a certain extent. However, I had no knowledge about nutrition. All I knew was I needed to eat more. So I went into like a clean eating kind of mindset where basically I just smashed heaps of broccoli, heaps of chicken, heaps of steak, all of these foods. I just smashed them. Like I was getting to a point where like basically before I hired my first official coach, I was just eating, like I'd buy like a 5 kilo whole rump of steak, get it cut up, and I'd just have like steak and broccoli for like 6-7 meals a day, just to be able to get like food in. I didn't know anything about nutrition. I didn't know about calories. I didn't know about protein. I didn't know about these things. I had the basics basically from the course that I did as a PT. However, it was very generic. Didn't get me results, that knowledge up front. I just knew I needed to eat more. So I was just eating more, eating healthy, clean foods. However, that didn't get me the results that I was looking for. So it got to a point where I decided that I wanted to compete in my first bodybuilding competition. So I decided that, and I approached my very first coach, who was a clean eating coach. He basically, he was very successful. He was a bodybuilder himself. He won competitions. He was training a lot of the other guys from my gym. He was basically the most successful PT in my gym at the time. So I approached him, got him on as a coach. He coached me through the preparation for my first contest. In terms of the training, it was quite difficult because I actually had a tear in my shoulder and subsequently had shoulder surgery after my first competition. However, in terms of the food that I was eating, what happened is I basically just got a meal plan sent to me each week, and there was changes made to that based on my skin folds or my results that I got. Now, this is all well and good to start off with, but what it just meant was, like, it got to a point where I was eating basically like 8 meals a day, eating like 200 grams of meat, vegetables and stuff a day, had a massively huge food bill. I was basically just eating all of these clean foods. I wouldn't be able to eat off that. That's completely fine. I didn't worry about that. It was easy. Basically, just stick to it, do it, and then get the results you're looking for. If that's what I had to do to get the results of competing, then I was more than happy to do it. So I did that for my first competition. It meant as I got closer, my food choices were changed. So it meant like my calories were technically restricted. So my meal plan I got changed basically, and it just meant that I couldn't have, like, had the rice cut out. I had the pre-post workout nutrition cut out and things like this, and it just decreased my overall calorie intake throughout the preparation. As I got closer, I had to do more cardio, had to do more weight training, had to do all this thing. This is all kind of standard, I guess, in terms of a competition prep. You're changing the variables to be able to ensure that you get leaner coming into a competition. Now, I did relatively well for my first competition, got some alright places in my very first competitions. I was pretty happy with how I went. Had my shoulder surgery, so it meant that I was actually out of training for basically the next 6 months after competition. So it meant that my progress was limited during that time frame. At which point, after I had my 6 months off, I'd just gotten back into training. I approached another coach who I saw basically on social media. I saw someone who'd won an overall fitness model competition or something, said that this guy was his coach. So I basically just went, oh, okay, cool, I'll go talk to him. He used to work at my gym, so I went and approached him to be able to get some coaching and find out a little bit more about that. So I approached him, and he actually does flexible dieting. So this was my first introduction to flexible dieting. At this point, I didn't necessarily know what it was about. I was all about clean eating, just eat clean foods, eat off your meal plan, you get the result that you're looking for. That's all I knew, basically. He told me it didn't have to be that difficult. You could make it a lot easier once you learned the process of flexible dieting, and you could actually get much better results. Basically, when I went to him, I was eating probably about, like this similar diet to what I was on for my comp prep because I didn't know any better. So I was basically eating maybe like 200, 250 grams of meat with basically just like salad every day, like all day, every day to be able to get the results. And he's just like, well, basically, you're probably over-consuming protein. You're not eating enough carbohydrates to be able to get the performance that you actually need in the gym. So basically what he did is set me up on my macros, taught me how to be able to do it. Just changed basically my macronutrients from massively high in protein to moderate in protein, moderate in carbs, and moderate in fats. And I actually got increased performance in the gym, actually increased in size. My training increased, my output increased because I was actually fueling my body how I should be. I was actually getting enough nutrition to be able to get the results that I was looking for in the gym. So what I did was I prepped with him for my second show. I was prepping for a physique category that time, but what happened is after 6 weeks out from the contest, I was told that I was too big for that based on the judging criteria at that time. So it meant that I had 6 weeks to be able to get my legs lean enough to be able to compete in bodybuilding, which is not necessarily much time for someone who's very like leg. Well, my legs hold the most fat, so it was a very difficult process to be able to get that within 6 weeks. However, we did it, got some great results. It looked a world of difference between the first time I competed and that time I competed. Much better placings, much better results. So having that and taking that into account, still had like a fair few injuries. Like I was still managing my shoulder injury, had a few leg issues as well. After that, my next season of competing, what happened is I actually approached one of the world's top coaches in terms of flexible dieting and got him to be able to help get me ready for the next season, the 2 seasons later, so the season B the year after. Just meant that I basically spent thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars with this world-renowned coach to be able to get ready to be able to prepare for my next competition. So I was learning a lot throughout this process and learning about the importance of having a good coach, what a good coach actually does, what a bad coach does, so to make sure I wouldn't do that, because I started working with athletes as well, started getting them results, so worked with professional fitness and physique models and stuff like that, and prepped them for their shows. So what happened with my next season of shows after working with him, doing my final prep on my own, I actually won lots and lots of categories that year, had some great results, and basically my body had dramatically improved. And the reason why was I was actually doing flexible dieting throughout that process. So it meant in the off season, I could stay leaner than I would have just done on clean eating, because if I was just doing clean eating, then I was massively restrictive over a period of time. And it meant that I just wasn't getting lean enough, staying lean enough in the off season to be able to diet down. Because what will happen is, if you're on a diet, basically what happens is, it's all well and good while you're on that diet, but the issue is as soon as you go off that diet, a diet is basically just a set of rules to restrict your intake to be able to get specific results. So if we talk about any diet, then there's a specific set of rules that restricts your intake, so it means you're in a calorie deficit to be able to get results. If we look at ketogenic, that just means like carbs are cut out, high fat, moderate protein. If we look at just a high protein diet, then it's just high protein, low carbs, low fats. It's just a form of calorie restriction with a set of rules around it to be able to do it. The issue is, it's all well and good while you do it, the issue is after you do it. Once you go back to habits, unless you stick with that diet for the rest of your life, and if that diet really sucks and it takes a lot of mental energy, then that is not good for you, both short or long term. You might get results to start off with. However, down the track, what's going to happen is you're going to have to work even harder to be able to get those same results again. So whenever we're thinking about a diet, the biggest test is going to be, can I see myself doing this diet in 12 months? If you can't see yourself doing that exact same diet in 12 months from now, then you're looking at a short-term fix to be able to get a result, and you're going to go back to old habits, and what's going to happen is you're going to go back to those old habits, and most likely you're going to lose those results. Go back to where you started, or more likely, even further, in a worse position. This is the definition of yo-yo dieting, where we go up and down in body fat all the time. So we need to have a dieting system or set of rules that we can continue to do it over a long period of time, so we can continue to get those results, both short and long term. This is why I got great results in my off season with flexible dieting, and I got really, really, really bad results when I was doing my original comp for clean eating, because it just means that, like, if you're restrictive and you can only eat this small list of foods, then what will happen is you will tend to crave those foods. If I said, all right, you can't eat chocolate again, ever, chances are you probably feel like eating chocolate, even like straight afterwards or the next day or some other time, because it has just been ruled out of your body. Unless it makes you feel violently ill, chances are you're going to start to crave that food that has gone to a food list that you can't have. So if you have a list of foods basically that you cannot consume for 20 weeks, 26 weeks, a year, because you're contest prepping or preparing for a show or getting results or going on a specific diet, if you're cutting out carbohydrates, then what's going to happen is you're most likely going to crave those over a certain period of time. So when we're setting up a diet, what we want to try and do is make sure that we have it set up so that we can do it both short and long term. Because the number one indicator in terms of results is always going to be consistency. When we have that massively intense period of restriction, and so there's two factors that we need to take into account that's going to determine the risk of us binging or adding heaps of body fat after a diet. Number one is the intensity of the restriction. So how restrictive, like if we can only eat like 3 different foods, then that's very intense. There's lots of foods that we can't have. And the period of like the duration of that restriction. So if it's a long period of time, then we're going to be more likely to crave those foods that are on the bad list. If it's a short period of time, then we're less likely to be able to crave those foods that are on a bad list. If there are no foods on a bad list, then most likely what's going to happen is you're going to not binge after competition and you're going to stay relatively lean. Yes, you will be calorie restricted, so you'll be craving a little bit more food after a competition. However, the likelihood of you binging is dramatically lower. And this brings me to my most current contest prep, which I just completed. What happened was I basically just ate grilled burgers because they're convenient and they're delicious throughout the entire contest prep, which was worked out to be like 80 burgers during that time frame. I ate other burgers, I ate other foods, I ate flexible dieting just means that you're basically choosing the foods that you like and enjoy eating and fitting those into the macronutrient goals to be able to get the result that you're looking for. So it just meant that like post-competition, it's probably been like 10 days since my competition, and I haven't actually put on any weight. So my calories have gone up, I've decreased my training output. However, because I'm not going into a binge-starved cycle post-competition, which most people do because they've been highly restrictive for that massively long period of time with this massive restrictions, yes, I've had to restrict calories. However, it wasn't for a long period of time comparative to other people, and it wasn't that I couldn't have any of these foods. I couldn't go to grill. I couldn't do this. These are all on bad lists. I could have whatever I wanted so long as it fit into the overall context of my caloric intake. So that just meant that like post-competition, still like competition weight just means that like in the off season, I can get in a much better condition and much better result, both short and long term. I can have that consistency. I've basically been tracking my macros for the last 880 days or something. It was 870 days last week or something, so it might be 880, it might be still in 870s. I'm not sure. However, that's a long period of time to be able to stick to a diet. Has my intake been perfect during that time frame? No. Have I gone through increased calories and decreased calories during that time frame? Yes. However, the dieting system has meant that I've been a lot more flexible in my approach and gotten amazing results during that time because I've been able to stay consistent to that, and I haven't gone through massive periods of like massive binging on foods, basically just eating until I get physically ill, which is quite common for people after a contest prep. So if we're talking about that in terms of like a general population person, then what will happen is like someone who's not doing contest prep, in other words, then what will happen is that means they can just do that for a long period of time because they actually understand what's in the foods. They get an education of what's in the food so that they can make better choices. Do they need to track their food intake every single day the rest of their life? No, definitely not. What it does is when you learn to be able to track macros, you start to learn and become consciously aware of what you're actually putting in your mouth, and in terms of a numerical value in terms of calories, what you're actually consuming. That way, if you understand what you're actually consuming, then you actually make better choices. And they've done studies on this where people have, they've taken like a big group of people, and the people who've lost more than 10% of their body weight and kept it off, I think it was like, I'm just spitballing the numbers here, but it was like between 70 and 80. I don't remember what the exact number was, but 70 and 80% of the people who had done that lost more than 10% of their body weight and kept it off over a long period of time. The number one thing that those people had in common was they had an accountability system around what they're actually consuming, whether it was writing it down, whether it was going through it with a coach, whether it was just tracking their macros. This was the number one thing that was the common aspect in terms of those people that got the results. So that's a great indication that by taking accountability of what you're actually consuming, you can actually start to take accountability, and then you can manipulate that over a period of time to be able to get more results. This is basically what happens with flexible dieting. So in terms of comparing that to my very first contest prep when I was just on a meal plan, and I won't give people meal plans because meal plans take the thinking out of it. You don't know what you're consuming, you just know that you have to eat these foods to be able to get the result that you're looking for. You just eat these foods. You don't necessarily know what's in it. You don't pay any attention to any of that. If you do that, then hey, it's awesome while you do it, but then when you finish, it's just a free-for-all. You don't know what to be able to eat when you're not on the diet. You don't know how to be able to eat when you go out to dinner with friends and family, when you have an event, when you go to Christmas lunch. You don't know the foods that you are able to eat to be able to stick to goals without using a scale to be able to measure every single thing out to be able to get the results that you're looking for. So that's just something we just need to take into account. So this is the importance of basically just getting that education around understanding what's in your foods and making the better choices both short and long term. So if we look at like the difference, as I said, between my first prep and doing If It Fits Your Macros, both times I was decreasing my caloric intake to be able to get the result. It just meant that like when I was doing clean eating or a meal plan, that was dropping at a certain rate, but I could only eat those foods. Same thing happens with flexible dieting. You decrease your calorie intake to a certain point as required to be able to get results. However, you make the choices on the foods that you want to be able to eat so that you don't have to take up mental energy and mental drain, putting pressure on your relationships, putting pressure on your work, putting on pressure on all of these things because you're having to use all of your willpower on just your diet. Hey, yeah, you can do that for a certain period of time. However, if you're taking that willpower from other points in your life, then you'll have to pay that back in other points of your life. That can be your relationships, that can be your job, that can be whatever. We don't want to be able to do that. We want to have doing competitions as something that is enjoyable, something that is not massively draining and a negative aspect on your life, so that you only do it every 4 or 5 years because you basically destroy your life during that time frame. Your relationships go to shit. Your social life goes to shit. We don't want that. We want to have it so that it's sustainable both short and long term, and you can be flexible in your approach. That means I can be like going out to like burgers with people throughout my entire contest prep, being sociable, working on relationships, doing all of these things so it's not this massive drain on my life. If I have that mindset around it, then I can do it as regularly as I want. Will I do it every year? Most likely not. Will I do it every couple of years? Much more often than like other people would because it's so draining on their body. It's so negative for them. Yes. So this is why it's exactly the same thing. It's just a different approach. We don't have to be obsessive about it. We don't have to basically live and die by whether we hit our macros. However, it just gives us an indication of where we are at. It just gives us a point of reference so that we can see, here we are. This is where I am. This is where I need my macros to be. It's a slight change. Then we can change that to be able to get results. Change that to get results and do that. So technically, if you think about like a meal plan, it makes you lean to start, but then it actually increases your risk of adding body fat at a later point in time. So if your goal is to only drop some weight or something for a specific date and then you want to get fat afterwards, by all means do it. If you'd like to be able to get to a point where you can maintain that point both short and long term without having to destroy your life, then I think flexible dieting would be a better option. Now, one of the biggest things is if you understand what's in foods, then you can make those better choices. Now, a diet, as I said, is a set of rules. So if we look at like the different type of dieting styles, we've got like If It Fits Your Macros is you can do like any type of dieting. There's like a meal plan and there's If It Fits Your Macros. They're the two dieting styles. So you've either got a list of foods that you can have and you can't have, which is a meal plan, or you can make your own meal plan based on hitting specific numbers. They're both hitting specific numbers for both of them. Both get the same result. However, one means that you actually get a better relationship with food, which means that you're going to actually get better results both short and long term. Now, if we compare those two, which is going to be the best both short and long term? Well, basically they've done studies where they actually see that fat loss is exactly the same for doing a period of restriction through someone getting a meal plan and people getting macronutrients and coaching on how to be able to do that. However, they say that post-competition, people are more, post-dieting phase, doesn't necessarily need to be a competition, people are more likely to stick to their eating that they learnt if they were doing flexible dieting because they actually understood what was in food, and they're more likely to maintain those results long term. Will everyone? No, some people still go off and binge. That's not a reflection. That's a reflection on that person because of the stresses in their life, whatever it is. They might have something going on that they go into that kind of cycle. However, the likelihood of that decreases with flexible dieting. That's why I recommend flexible dieting. And there's a lot of misinterpretations, I guess, around flexible dieting. People think it's just all about eating shit. However, what actually happens is I'll probably eat like a kilo of vegetables before I go to grill to be able to have my burgers. I have lean protein sources. I eat healthy foods, or foods that would be on a clean list throughout the day to be able to hit my numbers. And then I'm using the expendable calories of basically my daily budget to be able to go and consume foods that I actually enjoy consuming. Now, the biggest thing is I'm making sure that they fit into the context of my day. So long as I'm not going over my calories, I'm hitting my fiber intake, which is basically your fruits, vegetables, salads, foods like that are essential to be able to get all the micronutrients that we actually need. I'm taking that into account, I'm hitting those numbers, and then with the expendable calories, I'm using that on foods that I actually enjoy having. Now, they've actually done studies on this as well. They did a study between a paleo diet and a flexible dieting diet in terms of micronutrient deficiencies. What they found was with flexible dieting, they were even, but there was no deficiencies in terms of all the micronutrients that most people need. Now, in terms of paleo, they were actually deficient in one or two of the micronutrients that people actually needed. Now, if you think about paleo, it's branded as healthy. However, because you're not allowed to eat certain foods, then you weren't actually getting all the nutrients that you actually needed. Now, why do people who are doing flexible dieting get all the micronutrients that they need? Because they change up their choices all the time. If they're having like a banana or whatever that I've got here, then they're going to get certain nutrients. They don't have to eat that every single day, so they have different food choices. I might have a banana today, might be an apple tomorrow. What I feel like on that day I can consume so long as I hit the numbers. And that just means that I get a wider range of nutrients that I actually need rather than going, these are the only foods that I can eat at these specific times. That just doesn't work. It's not effective for increasing fat loss, and it's not effective for creating good relationships with food and body image for that matter. So this is just one fact that we take into account. So when someone's doing a specific dieting style or system of restriction, basically, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are superior to someone else. That means that, like, if someone is doing clean eating, they're not superior to someone doing flexible dieting. Someone who's doing flexible dieting is not superior to someone doing clean eating. It's just different choices. However, the outcome of those choices is what that person actually has to live with, and that is what they are choosing to deal with in the future. It doesn't mean that they're better or worse. It just means that they're going to get the outcome of that. So if we talk about someone who does clean eating, the outcome of that is going to be they're going to get lean while they do it. However, post-dieting phase, they're going to gain body fat or be more likely to gain body fat, and even more so than they actually started on. In terms of flexible dieting, studies have shown that if you do that for a period of time, you learn what's actually in the food and you tend to make better choices. That is the result of that. So it's not better or worse. That is just the choice that you actually have to make, and you need to understand that there's no superiority in certain dieting choices over others. It's not superior to be a vegan than it is to be a person who just eats a normal diet. It's not superior for you to do flexible dieting than it is for you to do an eating plan. It just means that potentially you are the one who's going to choose to do that, and you're going to get the results of doing that diet. That means you'll get the outcome in terms of fat loss to start off with. However, you'll live with whatever that result is, both long-term, short and long-term as well. So you get, hey, any kind of calorie restriction, you're going to get results to start off with. It's as simple as that. Doesn't matter how you do it. If you're in a calorie deficit, you lose weight. Now, you can do that by changing your food choices to clean foods because they're higher volume and lower in calories than if you were to smash an entire cake. That is just being in a calorie deficit. It's as simple as that. So you can choose to do that, or you can choose to be able to consume certain foods you actually enjoy having while still being in a calorie deficit. So below where your actual calories are required for maintenance to be able to live, to be able to maintain your weight. So long as you're consuming calories below that, you're going to lose weight to a certain extent. Now, your body will adapt to that over a period of time. However, this is the most basic principle that we talk about in terms of nutritional science. Now, going into a bit of a background again about kind of where I've progressed from in terms of making recommendations. I used to recommend meal plans. I used to do meal plans for me. If we look at my knowledge and skill during that first kind of year as a personal trainer, absolutely none. Had no idea what I was doing. Did my first contest prep, I had some understanding that we had to decrease our intake to be able to get leaner. We had to increase our intake to be able to add muscle. I had that understanding, but I had no idea what I was doing. I was basically recommending people just eat clean foods and things like that. Eat like chicken, eat this, measure your food, do this, then you're going to get an outcome. There was no actual knowledge behind it. When I actually approached my second coach, who was that flexible dieting coach, I actually did a course in nutrition to become ISSN, the International Society of Sports Nutrition qualified, which is the biggest, most recognized and the best nutrition, I guess, what is it, like overviewing organization in the world. So I became a member of the ISSN, became qualified to be able to write nutrition plans for clients and have it covered under my insurance as a coach, which in Australia is maybe like 1% of, probably less than 1% of personal trainers have that ability. And I had the knowledge to be able to do that. So with that knowledge, what I have eventually done is work with comp prep clients to be able to get them ready for shows naturally and healthfully, and get some amazing results. Plenty of first places, plenty of overall champions, plenty of pros, all of these amazing results with these people through using an evidence-based approach to be able to get those results. Evidence-based being flexible dieting, because the current data shows that flexible dieting is the best based on the current science, based on the current data to be able to get results. That is the overarching principle. Now you can do intermittent fasting, you can do keto, you can do low carbohydrate, you can do high protein, you can do flexible dieting however you want, dependent on the individual person. However, having the overarching principle of getting them to understand what's in the food is the most important factor. If that's the overarching principle, then they can get amazing results. If they're just given a list of foods they can have and can't have, you're setting them up and yourself up to fail. It's as simple as that. That's what the current data shows. That's why flexible dieting is the best solution based on the current data. Doesn't mean it's like you're a superior person by doing it. It just means that based on the current data, that's the best way to be able to get results, short and long term. As I said, you can still do high protein, you can still do low protein, you can still do high carb, you can still do high fat, you can still do low fat, you can still do low carb, whatever the way you want to distribute those macronutrients can be set by you based on how your body's going to react, what's going to be best for you. We're primarily talking about the difference between giving someone a list of foods that they can have and can't have, and giving them numbers so that they can make the best choices possible for them to be able to get the results. If we talk about building muscle, then we need to be in a calorie surplus. If we talk about dropping body fat, we need to be in a calorie deficit. That's how it works. That's what the science says, and there's no way around it. There's no magical foods that don't have any calories at all. There are foods that are high in fiber and low in calories. However, there are no magic negative calorie foods. So understanding that it's not the food type that is the determining factor in results, it is actually the calories, and the calories are just a unit of measure. They're not perfect as a unit of measure, but they are a unit of measure, so we can have a point of reference to be able to make choices based on getting the results that we're looking for. If we understand what's in the food in terms of calories, then we just have that point of reference. It's not as compared to good and bad, because if you understand, like an example, when I was doing clean eating for my very first prep, I was eating steak, I was eating fish, I was eating salmon, all of these foods at the start of my prep, but not at the end of my prep, because they became bad foods because they're higher in calories. So it was just one way to restrict my calories, was my protein sources went from high fat options to lower fat options. So technically they were bad foods at the end, so would I be more likely to crave those? Yes. So if we understand that, then that's just a form of calorie restriction to be able to get results. If we compare that to like carbohydrates, a good carbohydrate at the start was like rice and potato, foods like that. However, at the end, they moved to the ban list to decrease my caloric input. So it just meant that like definitions change, and if you're demonizing eating fish when that is not necessarily a bad food, just because at the end of your contest prep you need to be more calorie restrictive, then is that a good mindset, attitude, relationship to have with food? No, that's not a good mindset, attitude, relationship to have with food. If we understand that it's just nutrition, and we want to make better choices over a period of time. However, we don't want to just go, all right, this is a bad food. As soon as we set up definitions between good and bad, that is the start of creating a bad relationship, attitude, mindset towards food. If we have those divisions, then what happens is we feel guilty if we consume one of those bad foods. If we go out to dinner and we consume one of these bad foods, off-list foods, then we'll feel guilty, and then we start to have a bad relationship with food. We feel negative about ourselves. We feel like we're failing. Feel like we're failing. Feel like we're doing the wrong thing. We're not getting results. We're a bad person. When in fact, this is not the case. It just means that as so long as we take into account these foods that we enjoy as part of our diet, not the whole part of our diet, however, we fit them into our overall context of our diet, then that just means that we can still get results and have a good relationship with food, have good relationships with family members, relationships in our life, because we're not obsessive and massively restrictive in terms of our intake. So if we understand that, then we just have a much better relationship with food, we get better results, and we're just moving in the right direction, basically. So we're just going to give an example of a comparison to highlight a point here. If you have a banana and a Pop-Tart, which is healthier? Well, actually, it's a loaded question. If we've got a banana, this has more nutrients. It is better for us. There's less synthetic, I guess. I don't know if it's synthetic or whatever, vitamins and synthetic products in here. It's processed. The banana is high in nutrients. It's technically good for us. However, if we have that Pop-Tart, and that means that we can stick to our diet for a longer period of time, then that is much more better for us. If we can only eat bananas for our carbohydrate intake, then most likely we're going to crave other foods, and we're going to have a bad relationship with food. That's why we say, all right, is the Pop-Tart the best thing for you? Is it going to make you 100% perfectly healthy? Well, no. But if eating that is going to mean that you can stick to your diet for a longer period of time, then that's much more important than having one banana and having a massive binge afterwards, getting into a negative relationship with food and consuming massive amounts of calories, foods, just basically binging on everything that you can see. That's not necessarily what we want. We want to have that good relationship with food. We want to make good choices, yes. However, we're not obsessive over clean eating or having the perfect foods, eating organic, every single food. As soon as we get to that point of obsession, then that becomes an issue. That is orthorexia. That is a fixation on eating healthy or perfectly clean or organic foods. That is taking it to the absolute extreme. We do not want to get to that point. We want to get to the point where we can say, yes, we want to eat good, high quality, nutritious foods. If we decide to be able to go outside that, is it the end of the world? Is it okay to be able to go out to dinner with friends to a restaurant that doesn't have organic food available? Yes, that's completely fine, so long as the overall context of our diet is based on good, wholesome nutrition. Yes, then we can do that. Now, if we look at an example, if I said you could go to a restaurant and you could order grass-fed, no hormone added, healthy options in terms of like something that you like enjoying, so could be burgers, could be pizza. If we've got these healthy, natural ingredients, good quality salads, good quality, low calorie foods, and it was, as I said, grass-fed, no hormone added, RSPCA approved meat, would that be a good option to be able to consume food at that restaurant just once or twice, maybe once a week? Is that going to destroy your health? Is that going to destroy your diet? Well, no, it's not. And that's basically what Grilled is. Grilled is a burger company that actually provides these foods which are healthy, which are low in calories, which are flexible, which are convenient. These are options that you can decide to have. That's why I choose that option, because I can go and probably go to a different burger place and consume foods that aren't necessarily, they might be a little bit more fatty, they might be a little bit more calorie dense, but they might taste a little bit better. But that's not necessarily what I'm going for. I'm going for a choice where I know that the quality of the meat and the products is healthy, and I know that it's fitting into the overall context of my intake, regardless of wherever I go to get that, and it's readily available and it's affordable. So I can make that choice to be able to have that convenience in my life and make the best choices possible. And I've basically done that in my most recent contest prep. It meant that I consumed 80 grilled burgers during my contest prep. I still ate other foods at other places. However, this was just an indication to be able to highlight that it doesn't need to be obsessive about every single individual aspect of what you actually do. If you're flexible in your approach, then you can stick to that long term. And the example is post-competition. Have I hit my macros perfectly? No. Hasn't been 100% perfect, but it isn't during contest prep either. It doesn't need to be 100% perfect. However, it's meant that I haven't had massive binges post-competition. I've been able to control my intake because I was flexible in my diet all the way up. It just means that, like, post-competition, still haven't added any weight, and it's been 10 days. Whereas most people have added, I know of people who have added 10 kilos in that time frame. That is not necessarily optimal. That is not healthy. That is not good for the sport, and that is not good for that person individually. That is not necessarily a healthy option. And whenever I see people who generally do this, they come from people where they've been given a meal plan. And this is what I say to people when I give them a meal plan. I can say, hey, no worries, I can give you a meal plan, but what's going to happen is you're going to get results from that, and then you're going to add body fat again afterwards because you don't get education, you don't understand why you're doing it, and then you just go back to shitty old habits, and then you add on extra body fat afterwards. That's what the dieting industry does. It basically just sets you up to fail. What I want to do is I'm going to coach you through the process of learning how to be able to use flexible dieting to understand what's in the foods that you're actually consuming, the foods that you actually like, so that you can make better choices. That way, once you've gone through your dieting phase, you're not necessarily being massively restrictive, you'll make better choices. You'll get to the result that you're looking for because we're going to manipulate your macros, your training, your actual intake of food, your output through training to be able to get the result that you're looking for. Then, after that, you're going to have an understanding of what's in food and what training it takes to be able to get the result that you're looking for so you can maintain that long term. Best example of this is, I had a client that did like a 12-week challenge, must have been like last year or something, and he lost like 17 or 18 kilos through flexible dieting. And I haven't seen him in the last month or two, but like I've seen him quite recently, and he hasn't been training with me, hasn't been seeing me for like 12 months. And 12 months past that 12-week challenge, he has still maintained that weight loss because he actually understood what was in food. I haven't done any extra coaching. I haven't done anything. However, he's been able to maintain that because of the education he received through that coaching process so that he would make better choices long term. And now he's set up so that he can make those better choices himself rather than just having, here's a list of foods that you can and can't have. That's just setting people up to failure. And the amount of coaches that actually do that without actually realizing, like I did that when I first started. I don't blame people like that. I just thought at the start that was the best way to be able to get people results. I seriously did. That's how I got results. So I was like, okay, cool. That's the best way to be able to get people results. However, what I've learned now through my education as an ISSN sports nutritionist, which one thing I alluded to before was I actually lecture this course now. I'm actually one of the lecturers and the facilitators of this course because now I have that much knowledge in terms of nutrition that I can actually educate other people to that same standard to be able to get those amazing results with their clients as well. So now that I've got that knowledge, I need to share that with as many people as possible. If I share that with as many people as possible, then there's going to be less people given meal plans and more people given education so that they understand how to be able to get those results that they're looking for. They understand how to be able to eat the right foods to be able to self-manage their own intake after they've learned that process. How long does that take? It's not going to take like a week to be able to learn. You have to learn how your body reacts. Generally, like if someone works with me for like 12 weeks or something, number one, they'll learn relatively easily how to do it, how to be able to track their macros, and how to be able to hit the numbers. After that kind of 12-week period, most people will understand how their body works and when to be able to increase and decrease their calories based on the exercise output that they're doing to be able to manipulate that to be able to get results and to be able to maintain that both short and long term. So that's massively important. That's why I'm like, if someone asks for a meal plan, I'll tell them up front that I won't do it for them. I want to see what they're actually eating and I can make recommendations on how to be able to hit the numbers behind what they're currently eating to what the goal numbers are. I can give recommendations and get them to create their own meal plan. However, I won't just go, you have to eat these foods, you can't eat these foods. As soon as you create those divisions and those rules, you're setting someone up you're setting someone up to fail. And that's just how it works. That's what's been proven over time and time again. That's why we have an obesity epidemic. If you're just going through this cycle continuously of people just getting a meal plan, not being educated on nutrition, children not being educated on nutrition, and is calories the only indicator? No, but it's a measurable one. So that's why it's so important, because if we can measure it, then we can manipulate it. If we go back to the Pop-Tart versus banana analogy, we can't necessarily easily measure something like micronutrient intakes for a wide variety of people. That's why we want to keep it simple so that people can learn it and apply it. That doesn't mean it's going to be perfect. It's not going to be the perfect diet for every single person. It's not going to give you the perfect results. However, once we have that indication, that starting point, that point of reference of what someone's consuming, then we can manipulate that to make better choices. And that's the whole point. We're trying to make better choices in terms of our nutrition. We all know that if we eat fruits and vegetables, good protein sources, we're going to get healthy. We're going to get better results. So it's just giving us quantifiable data and that point of reference to say, this is how much I'm eating at the moment. This is what I need to be able to eat. This is the gap between it. We're going to close that gap so that people make those right choices to be able to get the results they want in terms of body composition and health. The biggest thing I find with most people is they think flexible dieting is consuming as much shit as you can into your macros. It is not that. It's compounded by social media because people are going to post up. I'm going to post pictures of my burgers because people want to be able to see that. They see that you can fit those things in. You don't want to see the oats and egg whites that I had for breakfast with berries, or the pork and vegetables that I had, or the coffee that I had every single day. You don't want to see all those foods. You want to see that it's possible to be able to fit those other choices in that aren't perfect, where you're choosing hormone-free, pasture-fed, organic, I don't know, no, it's not organic, I don't think, grilled, pasture-fed, no hormone added meat in terms of something that's a better choice, which is going to be grilled, and it's convenient. If they can see that I can actually do that and still get results, then that's going to mean that they're going to start to look into that to be able to make those better choices themselves. It's not that it's perfect, however, it's at a point so that we can get results for people and have it maintainable long term, rather than just going on a diet. Right, the best example is like going on ketogenic diet. All you're doing is cutting out carbohydrates and changing your macro balance to high fat, moderate protein, low carbohydrates. Hey, that's all well and good. You're just going to be going into a calorie deficit to be able to do it. Is there benefits of doing that? Yes. However, if that person can't see themselves doing that in 6, 9, 12 months, then it's not necessarily an optimal form of dieting. Can you go through periods of that if you're doing flexible dieting? Yes. If you're doing the combination of those two things, you've got the overarching principle of doing flexible dieting. However, having a keto balanced macronutrient intake, you can do that. You can get results from that. However, we need to take the overall calories into account primarily, and then make sure that we're not going from keto to massively high in carbohydrates in a quick period of time, because what's going to happen is if we're going into a low carbohydrate state over 4 to 6 kind of week period, depending on the person, you're going to downregulate your thyroid function, and that's going to mean that your ability to be able to utilize carbohydrates and metabolize fat is going to change. So that's not going to be optimal for people. If we go through a ketogenic phase shorter than that, yes, we can do that, make sure that we're not having that massive downregulation in thyroid function. However, if we're not tracking our macronutrients in terms of that, then we're basically just guessing how much we're actually consuming. And we can be going from a keto diet where we could be like 2,500 calories to going, just adding in carbohydrates could go straight to 3,500. If you're adding an extra 1,000 calories in a day like that, what's going to happen is you're just going to add fat. It's as simple as that. And then we're increasing that yo-yo dieting cycle. So if we use flexible dieting is just, all it is really is taking accountability for what you're actually doing by writing it down, by putting it into an app so that you can see the data behind it. That's as simple as it is. Now, if you're looking at improving your workouts, another thing that you can do is just write down your workouts to be able to see where your weights are in terms of what you're actually doing, because it gives you that point of reference and data to be able to make changes down the track. It's exactly the same. That's what flexible dieting is. It is recording what you're actually having so that you've got an exact point of reference of where you're at, and then comparing that to what the goal was, and then working out how to close that gap to be able to make sure that you actually do that. Now, a lot of people are going to say to me, they say, all right, oh yeah, I just didn't write it down. Well, you're just not taking accountability for what you're actually consuming. Yes, you might be close. However, when you start to make changes to foods that you're actually consuming, then it's going to increase the gap, and you think you might be close, however, you're not. And I did a video on this maybe last year. I basically did, all right, here's a 1,500 calorie diet, and here's a 2,500 calorie diet. So there's 1,000 calories difference. The 1,500 calorie diet actually, in terms of like scale weight of all the food, actually weighed more because I made low calorie choices like salads, low fat meats, and choices like this. The other one, I just used higher calorie meats. So in the low calorie one, I had rump steak. In the high calorie one, I had porterhouse steak. Massive difference in calories between those two. However, like the scale weight is the same. So if you don't understand the difference between 2 cuts of meat and the difference between the fat content and the calorie content of those things and fitting that in to the context of your food, then basically all you're doing is gambling, because what's happening is you're just guessing where you think it's going to end up. It's just a guess. It's as simple as that. If you've got data to be able to say, all right, this is where it's going to, this is what I'm actually consuming, this is where I want to be consuming, then you've actually got a point of reference to be able to relate it to. So, like, if you're just gambling, then ultimately the house wins long term. That's how it's set up. It's set up against your favor. If you have a system in place to be able to say, well, this is where it's landed each time, well, this is just a point of reference. Now we can make our judgment, our goals and our information based on that point of reference. Without that point of reference, we're just completely blind. We don't necessarily want that. If we have that point of reference, then we've just got something to be able to change our approach and adjust it as we required. This is all flexible dieting is. Flexible dieting is just a system of recording your food, basically. Recording your intake, making choices to be able to hit specific numbers to be able to do that, to be in either a calorie deficit or a calorie surplus, depending on what your goal is. Now, common question is, what should your goal be? Well, that's going to be dependent 100% on the individual, because you've got to take into account training, body fat, all of these factors, age, sex, work kind of things, like is your job active, foods like this, stuff like this. If you're looking at doing that, yeah, hit me up. Just send me a message. It's not for this time to be able to go into the details on how to be able to work that out. The whole point is to highlight that what I recommended when I first became a personal trainer is absolutely nothing like what I recommend now. Now that I've actually got further education, now that I'm actually qualified to be able to write diets, now that I actually lecture and teach people to be qualified to write diets myself, now that I've got that full understanding and have that knowledge based on science and evidence-based approach, based on the current data that's out there, this is what I recommend now. Now, it's quite arrogant to think that you know everything. I don't think I know everything at all. I'm constantly learning, I'm constantly improving, but this is what I recommend based on the current data that is out there, on my current knowledge. Now, I'm more than happy to say that what I recommended when I first was a PT is part of kind of what causes the obesity epidemic and the yo-yo dieting cycle. I acknowledge that. That's why now it is my goal to be able to help people move past that and get that knowledge and understanding and that coaching to be able to learn how to be able to use flexible dieting to get the results that they're looking for, both short-term and long-term. Because most people, like, if your mindset is you just want a quick fix, you just want to drop a couple of kilos, just don't eat for a couple of days. You'll lose some weight. It's as simple as that. However, it's not maintainable long-term, and that's what I'm all about. I'm all about helping people make changes both short and long-term to be able to get the results that we're looking for. So in terms of, I guess, where the podcast is going as well in the future, is going to be focused primarily on education on the right things. I'm not necessarily going to get people who are going to add to the yo-yo dieting cycle in the future. That's why I've had people like Joey on the podcast. That's why I've had Mike on the podcast, because their focus is getting people results long-term, not just having those quick fixes. That's what's causing the yo-yo dieting cycle. That's what's making it much worse than it is. And it doesn't need to be like that. It needs to be that sustainable approach so that we can get those results for people and then they can maintain them long-term and make the right choices to be healthy, happy, fit. So that they can, like if we go back to like the mission statement, chasing gains, they can chase the results or outcomes that they want, no matter what they are, by manipulating those factors, their nutrition intake and their training output. They're the key factors that need to be manipulated. If they understand how to be able to do it, if they need coaching through that process, that's all well and good. However, they need to be able to coach through that process and educated to do that. When I was first starting out in the fitness industry, I had no idea about any of this stuff. I was coached through that process. Someone helped me, so I'm going out to help as many people as possible to be able to do that and have that massive impact on the health and fitness industry possible. That's why I'm doing it. That's why I recommend flexible dieting, because it's the overarching principles of that to be able to get results. That's why it's important. I don't want to knock like necessarily meal plans. It's not optimal for people to be able to get results. However, if some people want to do that, then they can go find someone who is just willing to basically take their money and not really care about their future. That's not what I'm here for. I'm here to be able to help people be coached through the process so they understand what's in food and make the right choices themselves down the track. That's why I do it. That's why I'm passionate about sharing this information and getting it out there even more so that more people can actually get those results, both short-term and long-term as well. I want to set people up for success long-term. I'm not here just to take people's money, which a lot of people, if you look at the rise of the Instagram trainer, hey, meal plan for $99. Well, a meal plan is going to get you $99, but then most likely as soon as you go off that, you're going to go back to old habits anyway. So what's going to happen? Well, you're going to have to keep paying the $99 over and over and over again to get a new meal plan, to get a couple of different choices that's not necessarily going to work for you both short and long term. If you get that coaching, that education, that knowledge to be able to change your macros as required and the coaching to be able to learn how to do it, then you will be set up for long-term success. And you can apply that to a ketogenic diet, an intermittent fasting diet, to a clean eating diet. This is just the overarching principle that people need to understand. This is the most important thing. You can apply it to the dieting method that you want, but this is the overarching principle that people need to take into account. Because technically, like a meal plan and if it fits your macros are both doing the same thing. They're both being in a calorie deficit, just in revision. They're both in a calorie deficit. One is just a set list of foods that you can have and can't have, and the other, there is none of that. You choose. You get to choose. So long as you hit the numbers, you get the results you're looking for. One is setting you up for failure, which is the meal plan. Long term, sets you up for success. Very short term. After that, you're screwed. Flexible dieting sets you up for success, both short term, still gets the same results, and long term. So that's why I'm sharing this. This is a bit of a rant. I've had a few, like I'm continuously talking to personal trainers when I'm doing the facilitating of this course to be able to educate them through this. So I need to be able to share this with other people even more. That's why I got Alex on previously to the podcast, because he's the one who runs that course. He was my original flexible dieting coach. He's the one who started that course. I'm one of the facilitators of that now to be able to educate people, because that's what I'm passionate about, to be able to change the face of the dieting, industry, to be able to get people results. That's why I'm doing it. That's what I'm passionate about, and I want to actually change the yo-yo dieting cycle to a cycle where people can decide to be able to change their intake based on the outcomes that they're looking for and have that knowledge themselves to be able to do it themselves, not necessarily have to pay me or another coach for the rest of their life to be able to give them a plan to tell them exactly what to eat. They need to be able to think for themselves and learn that education as required to be able to get the results that they're looking for. So there we go, guys. Moving forward in the future for the podcast, lots more guests. Going to be talking a lot about flexible dieting. Going to be talking about a lot about business coaching in terms of, as I mentioned at the start, those personal trainers getting the skill and the knowledge to be able to increase their skill set and get better results for people so that we can get the gains that I'm looking for, which is basically change the face of the fitness industry, to be able to make personal trainers be the solution to the obesity epidemic that we currently have in the developed world. If we can get personal trainers the right knowledge, then we have the potential, the numbers are there to be able to help the masses to be able to change that trend and actually improve that. It's massively important to be able to do that. However, we need to be able to educate the personal trainers, because they're the front line of defense. You see a personal trainer generally on a weekly basis. You don't see your doctor every single week. Personal trainers have that potential to be able to get to the most number of people, because there's enough of them out there to be able to get that massive change that we need to be able to change that. That's why I'm doing it, and that's what I'm passionate about. That's the gains that I'm looking for, and I'm just willing to help anyone chase their own gains along the way, which is just their individual goals that they're looking towards to help. So that's why I'm working with PTs moving forward and people who are looking at improving their health and fitness and performance through nutrition or exercise. There we go, guys. Hope you enjoyed that one. A bit of a rant and a chat from me. If you have any questions, hit me up on social media. If you're interested in finding out more about flexible dieting and stuff, just send me a message. I'm always available, always willing to help people out. And then we can have a chat. Cheers, guys. Thank you for listening to Chasing Gains Radio. Be sure to use the Chasing Gains Radio hashtag on all social media. If you have any questions, queries, or comments about the podcast, use this hashtag. Thanks again for listening to Chasing Gains Radio. Be sure to share and like this podcast to help spread the Chasing Gains movement.